Well, good morning and welcome to the Hurricane Preparedness webinar. I'm Laura Sherman and I'm here with Patrick Kirby, and we're going to go ahead and get started so we can keep you all on track.
Good morning.
We have a great agenda over the next 45 minutes. We're going to talk about how you can fortify your home and family, both from an advanced preparedness perspective when a storm is imminent and then also after a storm. We're also going to talk and share some ideas on how to prepare your business, and then some insurance considerations, and then open it up to questions. So let's get started. And then about the speakers, I think it's important to note that Patrick Kirby has served in many capacities through his career and has actually gone through 3 hurricanes, Ike, Katrina, and Rita.
That's correct. And
so he has practical hands-on knowledge of things that we could be doing to prepare. All right, so what is a hurricane? Everyone knows the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale, and I have it here listed, so we're not going to go over it. But I think the important thing to note, as we've seen throughout history, even in recent history, is it doesn't have to be a hurricane to be devastating. If you look at Sandy, by the time that it hit New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania, it was considered a superstorm, so a tropical storm, and it still was wreaking havoc. And what you've also seen is that some hurricanes bring a lot of flood, others bring a lot of wind, and then others can actually bring a lot of rain. So each hurricane or storm has its own personality that can obviously wreak havoc in terms of damage on an area, which is why we need to be prepared for all 3 of those situations. So who's most at risk? You see here, this is information that has been pulled by actuaries to tell us, and they've modeled what regions are most likely to be hit. We've outlined the ones in light blue in Florida because that's where the majority of our clients are. And you see that, unfortunately, we are listed at the top of both of these lists. If anyone is interested in getting more information, especially about the storm surge flooding, we have some reports that we would be delighted to share with you. History of hurricanes in Florida. The photo you have to the left is absolutely terrifying, right? You see that there's really no method to the madness. It can happen anywhere, and it has happened all throughout Florida. 40% of all hurricanes do occur in Florida, although we've been very fortunate, knock on wood, that we have not experienced a hurricane in the last 10 years, which is the longest in history. Thank you, Patrick.
Knock on wood.
If you compare New Orleans and Florida, and I did this, showed this slide because I think it's very important, because I will tell you, when I did not realize that Florida has nearly 700 miles of levees. If you look at even just the recent flooding in Columbia, South Carolina, a lot of that was caused because of failed levees, similar to New Orleans with Katrina. Our infrastructure is old, it's in need of repair, and so a lot of times we don't think about those when we think about the potential for flooding in our area. We also, the infrastructure, even just with our drainage systems, are old, and a lot of times that can cause flooding, which we'll talk about here shortly. So are you prepared? This is the entire country. Obviously, you've seen hurricanes can happen anywhere, storms can happen anywhere. So while many of our clients are domiciled here in Florida, a lot of us have homes throughout the United States and abroad. So we want to make sure that you understand that storms can happen anywhere, as can any catastrophe. But today we're going to focus on hurricanes. All right, so let's get into some advanced preparation. First, on your home. A lot of this was compiled not only with the standard things that we should all be aware of, but we've been working closely with our insurance companies and with our clients that we've seen throughout the years. What are some things that caused damage on the homes with the family that maybe that aren't the obvious things that we all consider? So inspecting caulking around the home. AIG Private Client Group stated that they actually saw quite a few damage with Sandy and also Irene from small holes around around windows or doors that caused major water damage as a result of the rain hitting directly on those areas. Also replacing windows with wind impact resistant windows, which I'm going to show you some photos here shortly. And ensuring that your drains on terraces, balconies are not clogged, allowing the water to flow freely because you don't want it to pool, which can create dry rot. And roof coverings should be installed properly, and having a roofer to come out annually to inspect the roof. And also, if you happen to have clips, which I'm going to show a photo of here shortly, make sure that those are retrofitted, because it really does make the building envelope one structure, and it can allow the home to withstand higher winds so that it doesn't provide uplift on the roof, which a lot of times when you've seen photographs of homes that have collapsed upon themselves, it's as a result of the uplift of the wind taking the roof off and breaching the building envelope and causing the home to fall in.
And Laura, we should also mention that many of the things on this slide as well affect businesses in the exact same way.
Great point, Patrick. Thank you. And then also lighting fixtures and ceiling fans. If you do know that a storm is imminent, removing or anchoring those large light fixtures or sconces for open air patios is very important. Keeping your gutters and downspouts clear and good repair. Again, having someone come out, a handyman, the beginning of hurricane season, which is now, as we've already seen, making sure that they're in good repair and that they're clear, because those can obviously prevent backup of the water. Having your garage doors braced. Some of them you can actually add on for a storm, and then others are permanently affixed. If you have a backup generator, make sure that you test and have it serviced before hurricane season. The last thing you want to do is want to call them when a storm is imminent. And then yearly evaluation, I mentioned, of the roof, the drainage systems, and backup generators. And I'd also like to add plumbers as well. And consider a surge suppression system or a lightning rod arrestor system. And there have been great advancements in this area, and we have a referral network of great vendors if you're interested in any of these options. In your yard, making sure that you're pruning shrubbery and trees in your structures, and I would say just in your entire property. And if you want to call an arborist, they are wonderful at looking at potential damage. And then obviously if you think about when there's a lot of rain, we've seen a lot of overturned trees as well, so especially any that are near the structure. Using hardy native plants and landscape design can go a long way because they're not as susceptible to the wind or the potential rain. Using mulch instead of pebbles around planters, because as you can see, pebbles become projectile and high winds. And making sure that your yard drainage system is free of debris so that water can flow through freely. Here in the Tampa Bay area, we already experienced Tropical Storm Colin this year, and a lot of our clients experienced quite a significant amount of rain, so we saw the drainage systems of our yards most recently. And ensure that your property is clearly marked and accessible to emergency responders. A lot of us forget the fact that we might have to evacuate the area. If you do have a gated property, we recommend that you contact in advance the fire department and make sure that you have a Knox box or that it is accessible so that they can access it. And some of our high net worth insurers also have hurricane responders on staff that will actually come in and tarp roofs, or if they have to board up windows. So making sure that everyone has your current up-to-date contact information is very important. Some additional preventative steps include identifying someone responsible who can prepare the property or check on your property in your absence. Hurricane season is also during summer with a lot of our clients, and all of us are traveling. And you may be not only out of the country, but you may not realize that a storm is imminent. So identifying that person in advance and walking through your preparations and having it in writing is a great idea. If you have or employ domestic staff for children or aging parents, make sure that you have a prearranged plan for them so that they're also going to be there and available in the event of a catastrophe. Creating a written hurricane preparedness plan is really crucial, and I will tell you most of our client families find that their plans are really a disaster. They may have it in their head, but only they hold that information, and they may not be as accessible. So including your spouse, your children, and then caretakers or handyman, gardener, whoever you have close to you, and including extended family to have it would be very important. And including vendor contact information is very important. Statistics have shown clients who have maintained a relationship with their roofer or contract are much more likely to get higher up on the list. Because as you know, in the event of a hurricane or a catastrophe, there's a labor shortage, right, including a material shortage. So really leveraging that relationship that you have to make sure that you have preferred treatments and that you can get back into your house is crucial. Also, just little things like ensuring that your vehicles have regular maintenance, have a full gas tank, and contain survival kits. And that's important because sometimes you find, and we've seen this after even Sandy, fuel stations need electricity to run. So if the power lines are down, no gas will be available, and there might be a very long line. We've heard of clients who've been waiting in line for hours. So making sure that you have that available to you is important. When it comes to your collections or your valuables, you want to make sure that they're stored in a secure location. Obviously, checking even the hangers and the fact where they're hung is very important. Maintaining an inventory and having current insurance valuations for each object. And in fact, we would recommend every 2 to 3 years, taking them back to the same appraiser so they can easily refresh them is very important. You also want to inspect the conditions and engage the service providers, such as a conservator, before you need them. And in the event of a storm, packing the jewelry or collectibles or furs in boxes, covering them in plastic in an elevated area. One of the things that we found after Sandy was, and we'll talk about this here in the next slide, but is the chimneys. You know, people forget to close the flue or the damper. Water comes down, soot, dirt, come in and have damaged oriental rugs or furniture. Important documents, we all have them. Making sure that you, one, keep them in a safe, centralized location, and if you can, keep them electronically or in a safe deposit box. And I would even recommend going above and beyond and putting them in a sealed plastic container. Items include everything from birth certificates to account numbers to home inventories or titles. Anything that you would need in the event of a catastrophe should be included there. I will tell you, a lot of insurers after Katrina had a hard time paying off cars because a lot of our clients have not been able to find their titles. So again, this is a good time to make sure you have it all centralized in one location. Patrick, you laugh, but it's interesting. It happens all the time, doesn't it? You've seen it.
I have seen it.
Supply kits. And there's no rocket scientists here. However, what you'll find, in fact, Patrick and I were talking before hurricane season about our hurricane kits. And what we find is we start the season with it fully intact. At least we're the only 2 people in the Tampa Bay area. No, excuse me. But we have all the information, but then throughout the year, someone may need batteries, right? You may need to use the water, and then it gets depleted. So now's a good time to make sure that you have this information and these items in your house in one centralized location. They call it a bug out kit, right? So that you could just grab it. So if you need to leave, you have it in one location and you could take it with you and go to your evacuation spot. And then also, obviously, all of this information we have in a hurricane preparation flyer that we're happy to email you. But I would note that medications are things that people often forget. Cash, because again, banks need electricity for you to withdraw money, is very important. Anything else you'd like to add on that, Patrick?
I would just say that many of these kits are available from common sources like Amazon. Unfortunately, they don't come with the cash.
That's too bad. We'll have to work on that. All right, so things you can be doing to plan ahead. Becoming familiar with your community's disaster preparedness plan, where to go, what to do. Have an evacuation route in mind, because keep in mind, if you're going to be leaving, so is everyone else in your community, and you may end up sitting in traffic for many hours, which also could impact your ability to get gas. Select a point of contact in a common meeting place in case of separation. Oftentimes they'll mention that you should have a relative or a friend that lives out of the area that all of you should communicate with in the event that your cell phone dies or the cell phone towers are overloaded. Using even social media, right, to make sure that people know that you're okay. Also identifying a shelter room in your home. This could be whether it's for tornadoes or for a hurricane, and even in the event of a home invasion, but you want to make sure that it is enclosed if it's on the first floor and in a central part of your home with no windows. And make sure that you all could fit in there. Like, for example, ours is in our pantry, but when fully stocked, it would be difficult for my entire family and animals to be there. Removing all patio furniture, planters, sculptures, outdoor decorations from the yard and storing it in the garage or house. We've seen several times over the years, people have even thrown them in the pool, because the last thing you want is for items with low weight that could become flying debris if there is large winds. So you want to tie down large items that cannot be moved so that it is secure. We mentioned this before, but securing fireplace dampers and flues. Waters can get into the house from chimneys. So even once you've closed the flue, placing blankets or stretch wrap in front of the fireplace can significantly reduce damage. Making sure that you have fuel, whether it's for your backup generator, even if you have a portable tank, and even just those little gas things for your lawnmower can prove to be helpful. Moving your vehicles to a safe area in a garage away from trees with large limbs is a great idea as well. We had a lot of clients who had problems with just tree limbs falling, and also driving into water. We don't talk about this here, but we had over 20 cars that were totaled as a result of the flooding last August in the Tampa Bay area. So if you can't tell how deep the water is, or if you see large pooling, turn around, don't drown. Lower the pool levels to accommodate the estimated rainfall is very important, because the last thing you want to do is have to go out there in the middle of the rain or in the hurricane to continue to backwash your pool. Wind mitigation. These are just the considerations if you don't have wind mitigation with your home currently. It can significantly improve the catastrophe worthiness of your home. So everything from sealing your roof deck to prevent water intrusion, reinforcing your foundation with roof-to-wall anchoring. Simpson Strong Ties are very inexpensive. I believe they're under $1 if you want to have them installed. We can give you a lot of this information as well, and we have a lot of great contractors who can assist in this preparation. Here's a photograph of some roof-to-wall connections, and you see the photograph here to the right after a hurricane of someone who did not have that. And it's a beautiful home, but it was built, they got in right before the code changed. They were excited about that because they felt like it meant they saved money. But in the long run, as you can see, they actually end up spending a lot more. So obviously, if possible, we want hurricane clips, wraps, or straps that would basically make the building envelope one and further fortify the residence. And finally, hurricane impact glass is wind impact or large missile tested glass, which really can improve, obviously, your building envelope. And as you see here, it's like your windshield, right, where it will crack and it will break, but it won't collapse in, and so it does protect the home so that the wind can't get inside the house and have essentially a mini tornado in your house. Here's another example of some protection if you don't want to do wind impact resistant windows, which have really come down in price significantly. But if not, you can add some fabric screening and some other roll-away shutters. Fabric screen now is $10 a square foot, and they can add grommets on the vertical every foot, and it's very easy to install. I've actually installed them at home, and it really doesn't take much time or skill. A wind mitigation inspection, if you believe you have them but you're not sure, we recommend a wind mitigation inspection, which is under $100, that will actually outline what you currently have, and then we can also help you retrofit or fortify the home if it doesn't have them currently. And you see here some pictures of homes that didn't have that and collapsed. If a hurricane is coming, recommend moving your personal possessions away from windows and doors, put it to the center of the room, and cover them with sheets and blankets to just protect them if somehow water does get in, or building materials. Elevating furniture if possible if a flood is coming. Placing towels at the base of doors just to further fortify that feel. And like I mentioned before, reeling away those rugs and moving them to upper levels where they'll be safe. Drapes, I've seen everything from removal, or you can even just lift them from the ground, putting trash bags over them and roping them off so that they can be elevated and protected. And again, you can tell I really like the stretch wrap over fireplace openings because we have seen a lot of fireplace damage after a hurricane. If you do discover water in your home, really getting to it quickly is key. We have a lot of great restoration companies. There are a lot of fraudulent water restoration companies as well, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention to you that there's been an issue here in Florida with assignment of benefits, where a lot of restoration companies will actually even listen to the weather radios, they'll listen to fire department scanners, and they'll show up at your home, and under the false pretense of saying that your insurance company has sent them, they'll ask you to sign a document which essentially basically takes away your right to deal with your insurance company, and they are now dealing with them, and they bill them egregious amounts of money, and they're not even doing the work or performing the restoration up to code. So before you deal with any fraudulent water restoration companies, call us, call your insurer to make sure that they are a reputable business. But obviously you want to run the air conditioner to dehumidify the home, removing wet items and store them outside. If you have a flood claim, you want to make sure you keep those items, because flood does mandate that they seize the damage. Having multiple contractors coming and inspect it, not taking someone's word for it. And obviously calling your insurance broker to report the damage, even if you believe it's going to be under your deductible, having it on file and getting counsel from them is very important. And then also having the contractor there at the time of the adjuster so that everyone's on the same page and that you can get a fair assessment.
Well, thank you, Laura, for that very informative information about protecting your home and your family. We are going to talk for a few minutes about protecting your business from hurricanes. And the first thing that I would say out of the gate is that there are so many similarities between protecting your home and protecting your business. Things like roof straps and roof construction, impact-rated glass, window caulking, yard and property preparation, and furniture and equipment preparation are all very, very much the same. So the first question I often ask of any business owner or CEO is, are you truly prepared? And I have some interesting facts up here that in Hurricane Sandy, the lost business activity as a result of that hurricane alone was $25 billion. Now that's not even a Katrina or potentially Rita-sized hurricane, and that's just an astounding number to think about. And probably even more concerning to me is that as a result of a disaster, 40% of small businesses never reopen. And generally that's because they were not prepared to respond or prepare for a disaster. I can say that planning ahead can save thousands of dollars in lost revenues due to structural language, content damage, interruption of business, etc. But I do want to point out one thing about preparing your business. That people's mindset is typically one that hurricanes and disasters put you at a disadvantage, or it's just a misfortune, or it's negatively looked upon that we have to deal with it. And I like to think of disaster planning as an opportunity, and specifically around two areas. It's an opportunity to gain increased revenue and build your brand loyalty, and we'll get into a little bit of that later. It's also an excellent, excellent opportunity to build trust and loyalty of your employees as well. So how do we prepare an emergency response plan for your business? It really focuses in three areas. And I'm going to talk to you about how you prepare your people, how you prepare your property, and how you prepare your operation. I have insurance as kind of the foundation there, as it is often the last bastion when any of these three fail. So let's start with people preparation and response. One of the most important aspects is communication procedures and protocols. Employees, we often start with communicating with employees with a call tree or a call-in mechanism. But I want to stress the point that this isn't just to disseminate information about what's going on in the business. It's just as important to collect information about the status of your employees. And that's kind of under the second bullet there. Conduct a condition assessment to monitor the welfare and the status of the employee. Many employees have small children, babies. They may have needs with food, water, maybe some assistance in getting someone to come over and repair their home. If there's enough damage, we may have other employees that may be in a position to help where they might be able to stay in that area, or etc. And that's really where you can make a huge difference in building trust and loyalty with employees. And please don't forget about your clients and vendors in your communication protocols as well, as those, it's critical that you communicate to them about your operation, when you might be back up and running, etc. Next, determine who you will need to carry out the hurricane preparations and response. And I like to think of this in three sections. So prior to, what employees are going to be responsible for prepping the building, setting up a secondary business location with computers, etc., to get your office up and running, who's going to contact clients and vendors. Then during the storm, who's going to monitor the property, if there is someone at the property, or if it's even safe to do so, who's going to monitor the storm and disseminate any news and instructions to employees during that time. And then after, who's going to conduct the operations for damage assessment, who's going to contact clients or vendors, and who's going to be responsible for resuming and or moving the operations as well. And then very, very important is educating your team on their own personal hurricane plan, because your business will have needs in the aftermath of a disaster, and you'll need them to respond to that. Well, if they don't have their own personal hurricane plan or personal disaster plan in place, that can be a problem. So with your key critical employees, it's always a good idea to verify their plan and that they have a disaster kit readily available.
And we could actually send you our 2-page overview on how to develop a catastrophe plan, and you can send that out to your employees as well.
Thank you, Laura. And moving on with people, if you notice the little illustration off to the right, the breaking news, the payroll pause, how many of us want to pause in our ability to pay our employees? In many small businesses and even large businesses, we pay our employees by check because they either don't have a checking account, choose not to do direct deposit. So have we thought about how we're going to pay them? How are we going to get them the money that they so desperately need, as many people live paycheck to paycheck? Again, another great way to establish trust and loyalty with your employees, because there's nothing more important than them having the ability to support their family after a disaster. Other considerations to take into mind is if the business is not in operation or will not be in operation for a period of time, will we pay our employees anyway? If so, for how long? Can they use sick days? How about vacation days? All of that probably needs to be communicated with employees prior to a disaster. Obtain fresh emergency supplies for employees. Not only at the business location, you may have a need to have a team of people that may spend the night, maybe monitor the property post-storm. Do we have the supplies necessary? The blankets, the tarps, the place to sleep, the food, the water, maybe some extra clothing. You think about an employee coming into work afterwards and they have no power. How do they do laundry? How do they ensure that they have good work clothes? You may want to supply some work clothes for them depending on the business that you're in. All of this should be decided upon and communicated prior to the storm. I should also make a great call out. Does the business actually have any emergency supplies for employee use? We're requiring employees to come into work, or we would like them to come into work. Do we have fuel for their vehicles? How about fuel for their generators? How about extra food and water in case somebody didn't have enough or some got destroyed in the disaster? Being able to provide an employee with this during a storm, again, builds trust, loyalty. They want to come in, they want to help. And then last but not least, practice these emergency procedures and policies regularly, the call tree, the operations, the damage assessment, the backup operations, the payroll computers, etc. All right, we move on to property. So the next step is, how do we protect our property? Vulnerabilities such, or know your business. And know the vulnerability of your business. Things like flood zones, access to the business after the storm, Do we have access routes mapped out for employees? We know where the low-lying areas are. So post-storm, we may not know, or we may know where those flood zones would be, where the waterways or the roadways would be covered with water. We want to avoid those and have those planned out ahead of time. Do we know about our neighboring properties and businesses and their vulnerabilities as well? I was just at a client yesterday, Laura, who I don't believe anyone knew, but they made missiles for the military. And the fuel for that is called lithium or liquefied lithium silicone, which explodes when exposed to water. So it's highly explosive. So that's something good to know. In a disaster, if their roof got ripped off, you might not want to get near their business or yours. Again, so review your list of major equipment. That's the next thing. And furnishings to determine and record which items need to be protected or removed, and then review the plan for mitigating property damage before the storm, which I'm going to cover on the next slide. So many of these things, we covered under the home, and they're synonymous with what you would do to protect your home property as well. But clear your gutter, your roof of debris, and check drainage areas for problems. Ensure satellite dishes are secure or removed prior to the storm. Many insurers inspect to make sure that you have a plan in place to remove those, as those often in a hurricane can come loose and create a projectile that could hurt someone else or their property. Ensure rooftop equipment is properly secured. Clear the surrounding grounds of loose materials, trash that might blow away in the wind. Do not use rocks or lava stones. Those become projectiles that can break windows, etc. And do not forget about trash barrels, ash cans, outdoor furniture, etc. Clear branches and plants from the building. Consider covering or boarding windows and sandbagging doors. There are restoration companies and preparation companies that can do that for you. And the further ahead of the storm that you arrange that, the better off you'll be. Move computers, desks, valuables away from the windows and cover with waterproof tarps. And then last but not least, unplug all non-critical electrical devices. So why would we do that? So the obvious answer is electrical surges during a storm can damage critical computer infrastructure or other electrically powered equipment. The not so obvious answer is you do not want to walk into your flooded business after storm and be in a bathtub with a hairdryer when the lights suddenly come back on.
Great point.
So a little bit more on property preparation. Ensure your storm monitoring systems are operating efficiently, such as pumps that mitigate the water around your property. Verify battery-operated equipment and supplies needed to maintain property integrity and security are available in operation. One point here that many, many people forget is, do you have materials on site at your business that if you responded to the storm and you wanted people to stay away from your property, do you have signage that says do not enter? Do you have tape that tapes off your area, do not enter? And have you considered hiring a security resource post-storm to monitor your property afterwards to protect it from looting, etc.? Okay, property recovery. So a very important aspect of protecting your business is responding to it after the storm. Create a post-storm damage assessment that is specific to your business. Decide who's going to complete that and have procedures for the safe entry to the property or the building. Once you record the damage and do the damage assessment, make sure you notify local authorities of any dangerous conditions, down power lines, gas leaks, building structure problems, etc. And then also report that damage to your broker or insurer to make sure that we get a claim moving in the right direction. Notify the security company if you have decided that their presence is going to be necessary. Notify vendors of needed repairs, a timeline to complete those repairs. And here is the critical point. Once you have established each one of these points that I just covered, set up regularly scheduled conference calls to discuss property conditions, repairs, employee status, and also with your clients. So normally how these are set up is you will get together with your restoration company and your employees that are making repairs and trying to get your business back up off the ground. Once you have that conference call, you're going to want to communicate with employees afterwards, the status of the business, what is the timeline, who needs to be at the business at what time, and then last but not least, certainly, is communicate to clients when you're going to be back up and running. If you're a manufacturer, when are you going to be able to ship their goods to them? When can they expect your services to be back online? And again, this is a big differentiator. If you have the proper planning in place from a business perspective and you're able to be back up and running within 48 hours, 72 hours after a storm, think about the competitive advantage you have over other vendors who are unable to get back up and running and provide services that other businesses that may be out of state need desperately. Let's talk a little bit about your operations preparation and response. So the first step is to review and update business continuity plans on a regular basis. There are 7 best practice components of a business continuity plan or emergency response plan, and they're listed right there below. I have a business continuity plan that has more detail on this. If you would like, please let us know. We can forward that to you. I'd be happy to cover that in more detail. Verify critical vendors' business continuity plans as well. Ones that supply you with the goods and services that you need to provide your service or your product. Always a great idea to make sure that they have a good business operation and a good response to a disaster. And then evaluate the possible impacts on the opportunities for client or customer service. I spoke a little bit to this on the last slide, but there is a significant upside on being first back in operation. If you're a manufacturer, you're the first one delivering products and services to your clients. If you're a retailer, you're the first business out there who is able to sell needed supplies and materials to the general public. It's an unbelievable response when you're up first and running first and providing those goods and services. It really shows that you have your operation under control and you are the go-to provider for these services compared to your competitors. And then quickly and consistently communicate status and timelines to your clients and customers to let them know what's going on. And then lastly, on operations and preparation and response, compile a list of important phone numbers, account numbers, and addresses that you're going to need post-storm. In many cases, you're not going to have power or access to a computer. You're going to need to have these on a piece of paper and readily available. Keep duplicate records, backup of computer data files, protect the documents in a bank safe deposit box, or other off-site storage or in waterproof containers. Develop a communication plan for vendors, clients, customers, and employees. Discuss with local businesses possible recovery coordination efforts post-storm. You never know when you may have a recovery company right next door to you that may be able to help. And then scan items to keep an electronic copy on a flash drive for easy access post-storm. And Laura.
And then also to understand your insurance coverage is very important. You want to make sure that you're reviewing your policies with your insurance advisor to ensure that you understand them so that you don't find out at the time of a claim, right? Do you have flood insurance? What does that flood insurance cover? What does the hurricane deductible? Reviewing your deductibles, special provisions, and loss reporting provisions is very important because each insurer may have specific and special loss reporting provisions, especially in a catastrophe. They may have a dedicated phone line for a tropical storm or a hurricane, or if it involves water damage, a lot of personal insurance or homeowner insurers here in Florida have special provisions before you start the repair work. You need to make sure you understand whether a flood or a covered peril is covered or excluded. We've heard of horror stories of that, thankfully not our clients, but throughout the storms like the Sandy. And knowing how the building property is valued under the policy. Is it actual cash value? Do you have a co-insurance clause? So really just making sure that those are up to date. And examine your business interruption or time coverage details. Do you even have business interruption? We work with a lot of businesses when we first meet them that think they have it, and when in fact they don't. We think it's so important, we're going to say it again, making sure that you have the contact information and your policy numbers is so important. I will tell you, I keep not only a paper copy, I also have created an electronic business card under my contacts that have policy numbers and information. And also proactively meet with your insurance companies or amazing people like Patrick to set up claim management protocols to determine who's going to represent the insurers at your organization and who's going to be responsible to even collect the data in a claim adjustment process. Like I said, making sure that you have the procedures and the people available for your organization is very important, because who shows up, who makes sure the lights can go on, who's going to make sure you're not walking into a bathtub with a hairdryer. And also determine if all the asset values are current for potential claims, including the property damage, like we mentioned, the business interruption, even taking video inventory in advance, both of a business and of a residence. And finally, understanding the financial strength of your insurer is incredibly important. A lot of times here in Florida, people have the impression that if it's a demo tech rating, it's AM Best rated, and that's not necessarily the case. And a lot of times the financial strength of these insurer really is relying on the reinsurance structure that they have. So making sure that you understand that, especially if you have a significant property. And making sure that you work with the right insurance advisor that has capabilities to assist you in a claim. For example, we work with Patrick, a claims consultant who can assist our clients in the event of a claim to not only help file the claim, but for claims advocacy. Also, we recommend that you do a wind and flood cost-benefit analysis. We find a lot of people when we first start meeting with them are strictly focused on wind, but when you look at the storm surge potential, especially along the West Coast, as you saw on that list of top 8 cities that are vulnerable to storm surge, it's very important to understand that you may be susceptible to flood, even if you're inland, you're not right on the coast. Also, just understanding the policy contract and making sure that you're working with your advisor to really understand the differences. Even in the deductible, there's a wind and hail deductible, a named storm deductible, or a hurricane deductible. Which one does your policy have? And finally, there might even be landscaping limitations, right? And a lot of our clients invest a lot in their landscaping and don't understand that there may be limitations in the event of a storm. Well, we know we've given you a lot of information over the last 42 minutes. We do now want to open it up to questions. And I apologize, I understand that we have a slight echo. We hear it too. We're not really sure why. We've tried to reduce the volume. We've tried everything. We're not sure exactly what's going on there. But if you do have a question, we'd like to open it up. If you could type the question, we'll read it aloud and answer it as best we can. If you're looking to ask a question, on your screen you should have a box where you have options to X out of your presentation to open it. There's a place for questions. That's where you can type your question. And we do have one question, and it asks if this presentation is available online. It is not available online. However, if you want to email us, which will get you right here. Let me get this back to this. There's both Patrick and my email address. If you want to email us, we'd be delighted to email you the pertinent information. Thank you, Betty. We also have a question on can we email information to clients? Absolutely. In fact, we've taped this webinar, So we will also make it available in the future. But yes, we absolutely can email both Betty, and we can do a version to send to clients as well. Well, if there are no further questions, what we'd like to do is you have our email and our phone number, so feel free to call or email any of us. We really appreciate your time today, and we hope that you found this of use. Thank you so much. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody, and let's hope for a hurricane-free season.
Amen.
Bye-bye.